Hey there, it's Wendy from Worldwide Speak, and I'm back today to talk to you more about transition words. And specifically, I'm going to go over some transition words that we use to compare and contrast. So when you're beginning to write in English and you need to write a compare-contrast paragraph or essay, this is the video you need to watch so you can get the use of these transitions correct. You ready? Let's learn. All right, I said I was going to talk about transition words that we use to compare and contrast. If you can see the graphic here with the two circles that have words on the outside and then words on the inside where the circles overlap, it's called a Venn diagram, and we use that diagram to compare things. And here, the two things being compared are oranges and apples. The things on the outside, such as thin peel and thick peel, are the things that are different. And then the things that the two items have in common, the two things that oranges and apples have in common, are in the middle where they overlap, such as they both grow on trees and they're both fruit. Now, the transition words we'll use to show similarity, the place where the two items overlap, where they have something in common. And then we'll use transition words to show contrast. And those are the things that are different between the two things. And these transition words are really important because they signal to the reader, oh, look, this writer is going to compare something to something else, or this writer is going to contrast two things. All right, when we compare, we show how two or more things are similar or are alike or have some qualities that are the same. And the transition words that we use, there are a bunch of transition words, but I'm going to give you two transition words that I'd like you to focus on and to use those and to internalize those transition words so you really grasp the concept. The first one is the word similarly, and the second one is the word like. Let's take a look at an example showing similarities between Chicago and Houston. And we'll do an example using the transition word similarly. So here is what it would look like in real life writing. Chicago has a river running through the city. Similarly, there are bayous that meander back and forth throughout Houston's downtown. Now, the first thing I talked about was Chicago. The second thing I talked about was Houston, and I showed that they were alike by using that transition word similarly. Note, there is a comma directly after the transition word similarly. So when you're writing it, similarly, comma, it's really important to remember the comma, or else it can be a little confusing for your reader when they're going through your paper. Also note, when we are comparing two things, we use the transition word to begin the sentence of the second thing that we're comparing, not the first thing. Okay, so we did an example showing a similarity between Chicago and Houston using the transition word similarly. Now, what would it look like if we used the transition word like? Well, what's interesting about using the word like is that like needs a noun or a noun phrase after it. And then the comma comes after the noun or noun phrase. Let me show you what this looks like with an example of real life writing. So I would say, there are so many great restaurants that offer outdoor seating in the Windy City. Like the dining options in Chicago, comma, many restaurants in Houston have patios for those who enjoy eating outside. Let's talk about this in more detail. So first of all, what's the Windy City? The Windy City is a nickname or another name for Chicago. I wanted to vary my writing a little bit so I wasn't saying Chicago all of the time. That could be a little boring or repetitive. So the first thing I talk about with Chicago is that it's really great because there are many restaurants with outdoor seating. Now, I need to show my reader that Houston also has outside dining. So if you'll notice, I begin talking about the second thing, which is Houston, with the word like. Now, what am I comparing? I'm comparing restaurants, right? So I need to mention restaurants again, and this is where the noun phrase comes in. Like the dining options in Chicago. I used the words dining options instead of restaurants again to vary my writing to make it more interesting. So I mention like the dining options in Chicago, comma. Many restaurants in Houston have patios for those who enjoy eating outside. So then after I use like and the noun phrase that talks about Chicago and the thing I'm comparing, then I begin talking about the second thing. Like I just said, it's important to note that when you use like plus a noun or noun phrase, the noun phrase refers back to the thing you just mentioned. You're going to talk about Chicago, and then you're going to use the word like, talk about what you were comparing in Chicago, put a comma, and then you begin talking about the second thing that you're comparing. All right, so I showed you the two transitional words with comparing, similarly and like plus a noun or noun phrase, and I gave you examples for those. Now let's do the same thing with contrast. When we contrast, we show how two or more things are dissimilar or not alike or have some qualities that are different. What are the transition words that I'd like you to learn today? I'd like you to learn the transition words in contrast, followed directly by a comma, and unlike. Let's take a look at an example. We're still talking about Chicago and Houston, but now we're going to shift our focus and we're going to contrast the two. Let's begin showing this contrast by using the transition word in contrast, directly followed by the comma. What would this look like in your writing? Here's an example. The weather in Chicago varies quite a bit with 4 distinct seasons. In contrast, it feels warm most of the time in H-Town with very little variation in temperature and no real distinct seasons. As you can see here, in the first part, I talked about Chicago, and then I signaled to the reader that I'm going to contrast two things because I use the transition word in contrast, comma. Remember, you really need to have that comma right after the words in contrast in order for it to be correct. And then I go on to show how the weather is different in Houston than it is in Chicago. And instead of repeating Houston, again, I like variation in my writing, I used Houston's nickname, which is H-Town. All right, so we just did an example with in contrast, and now let's do an example with unlike. And like, the transition word like, this also takes a noun or a noun phrase followed by a comma. Let's see what this looks like in real life writing. So we're going to start with Chicago again, and then we're going to show another difference between Chicago and Houston. The beaches along the lakefront make Chicago seem like it's an oceanside city because Lake Michigan is so expansive. Unlike the landscape of Chicago, Houston is landlocked and has no beaches, nor does it sit on the shores of an enormous lake. Let's look more closely at this example. We begin with Chicago, and what are we talking about? We're talking about the scenery, the environment, the landscape. Chicago has a beautiful coast along Lake Michigan, and I want to show how Houston doesn't look like that at all. So I talk about it first in Chicago, and then I use that transition word unlike, followed by the noun phrase, which is the thing that I'm contrasting between the two, which is the scenery, or the landscape is the word I used here. So I say, unlike the landscape in Chicago, remember I refer back to the thing I was just talking about, comma. Now I start talking about Houston and show how it's different. Houston is landlocked. There's no ocean or beach or lake. There's no body of water, large body of water around it or next to it. And it doesn't have a shoreline. It has the bayous that go through it, but it doesn't have beaches or a shoreline. So you can see here that we talk about Chicago, we use the transition word unlike, and then we use the noun phrase, which includes the specific thing that I'm contrasting about Chicago and Houston. And I refer back to what I just talked about, which was Chicago. I put the comma, and then I start talking about the other place or the other thing that I'm contrasting, which in this example is Houston. So there you have it. I gave you two transition words or phrases to use to show similarities, and those are similarly and like plus a noun phrase. Remember, after the word similarly, there is a comma directly after the word. With the transition word like, there needs to be a noun or a noun phrase, and after that, we put the comma. And then for differences, we have in contrast, comma, and unlike plus a noun phrase or noun, comma. Now this would be a good time to pause the video, write down these transition words, and then you can start using them in your writing so that your writing is much more clear and much more effective. Thank you for learning with us. Please remember to click the like button, and always, we truly appreciate when you subscribe to our channel. For more English resources, or if you'd like to take a course with one of us, please visit our website at worldwidespeak.com. See you later. Thank you.